Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting adventure in the Storytellers. Tonight we have a great guest, a very talented painter, artist, storyteller, and the former art director at DC Comics, particularly back when I was working there, um, Mr. Mark Chiarello. Let's welcome him into the studio. Hello, Mark.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. It's good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It has been. I think the last time I saw you was at San Diego Comic Con.
Must have been a long time ago. I don't think I've been to San Diego in a couple of years. You
Yeah, oh
know,
yeah, yeah. It's been I don't go. I don't particularly that it's too busy for me.
yeah, I
Uh,
kind of stopped. After I left DC. Man, 20. I think I'd gone like 28 years in a row, and that's more
oh
than enough. Yeah, it's more than
yeah.
enough.
So you've seen it grow from that small convention to this monolith.
Yeah, I mean, it's somebody said, might have been me. Somebody said it's the greatest thing you'll ever do, and at the same moment, it's the worst thing you'll ever do. It's so cool, but it's just too many people, and it's a
It's
lot.
just sensory overload for me.
Yeah,
Like even just trying to get a bite to eat, everybody, you got to cross those train tracks and
yeah,
I got stuck on the other side one time, because the train came by and it was like I had to wait 45 minutes.
yeah, yeah. Boy, you're bringing back memories. One of the other big reasons I stopped going was I used to get stopped like 20 times every day. People want my autograph because they think I'm Mark Hamill. It's like, oh, I love your work on Star Wars. I'm like, no, dude, it's not me. It's not me.
Oh, man, you could have really monetized that.
One guy actually fought with me. He's like, "No, Mr. Hamill, I know who you are. Please just sign." And I almost signed the autograph, but I didn't do it.
Oh, that's hysterical. I love that.
Yeah,
So you're living in California now, but you're originally a New York guy, correct?
yeah, yeah. Lived my whole life in New Jersey and New York. Went to school. I went to college at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. It, you know, I always hated coming out here to Los Angeles. I'd have to come out for business for DC, and I just didn't like Los Angeles at all. And then I was told, "Oh, DC's moving," so I had to move. Pick up and move to LA, and I was just like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do? I hate it there." And oddly, the minute I got here, I just liked it. The weather's great.
hmm,
Um, the pace is a lot slower,
right.
and you
So
know,
when you went to Pratt, did you have a professor whose last name was Graham?
no.
Okay.
Not that I know. No, we had some really great professors, some great illustrators, a guy named Baron Story and Dave Pasalakwa, some really great illustrators, but no Graham.
Okay. I have a second cousin. It was on my grandmother's side. I'm named Graham after my grandmother's maiden name,
Oh,
and I think his name is Joe Graham, and he was a
oh.
professor at Pratt.
Yeah, maybe
So
he was like a painting professor. I
could
was in
be.
the illustration program. He might have
Oh,
been a
okay.
drawing teacher or a painting teacher.
Is there a comics program at Pratt?
There wasn't back then. I mean, this is the '80s. You and I are getting a little on in years.
How
Uh,
dare you?
no, they would kind of poo-poo it, our interest in comics, and the instructors, the professors would always, you don't want to get into comic books. And I was roommates with Kent Williams, the great painter, and John Van Fleet, the equally great painter, and George Pratt, the equally great painter. And those guys were drawing comics professionally when they were in college.
Hmm.
And man, all you need to do is see somebody making money at something that's kind of fun, and
Hmm.
you're like, yeah, I want to do that too.
So was that an impetus for you when you saw those guys to get into comics because you were an illustration major?
Yeah, yeah. I've said it before. I really wanted to. When I was a kid, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an illustrator. I wanted to draw or paint the cover of TV Guide and Sports Illustrated and Time and Newsweek. And as a kid, I read comics, but I never really thought that you could pursue a career in comics. I mean, I know it's going to sound stupid, but I knew that people drew comics, but I didn't know that people actually drew comics. Like, who does that? You know, and then, being a kid and collecting them, and then going to school, and all my friends would say, you should get into comics because you love them so much.
And who did you admire when you were a kid, when you were collecting and reading those comics? Whose work jumped out at you?
Yeah, I was really the Marvel kid. Before the age of the Marvel zombie, I was one of the original Marvel guys, in the 60s, late 60s and 70s, all through the 70s. I loved Stan's writing. I loved the stories he was telling, and the linear stories, and morality tales, and good and bad. And the artists are really what hooked me. Jim Steranko and John Romita and John Buscema and Gene Colan, especially Gene Colan. God, so many great artists.
Yeah,
Were you a Marvel kid or a DC kid?
both. Actually, I was a monster kid before I got into comics.
Gee, surprise, surprise.
Yes, henceforth our mention of Kelly Jones the other day.
Yeah,
Yeah, I read monster magazines, and then I kind of found out about comics through the articles in there because there was a lot of crossover. And a teacher brought in a stack of comics for us, for the kids at recess once, and there was a Justice League comic in there, and I was like, well, I know most of these characters from the cartoon shows and Adventures of Superman and Batman and all that kind of stuff, so other media, but now I'm seeing them in comics, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then I got into Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, and I'd go back and forth between the I didn't have any one allegiance. Let me just say that. I just like good comics.
I was, man, I wouldn't look at a DC Comics if you put a gun to my head. It was just, I was Marvel all the way. As a matter of fact, an old friend of mine from back in New Jersey, a guy named Frank, he was the big DC guy and I was the big Marvel guy. And he said, you got to check this out. Check out this comic. It's Swamp Thing by Bernie Wrightson, and Batman is in this issue. And I'm like, now you know what comic I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I'm sure you
I do.
That issue, right? And I'm like, I'm not looking at that shit. Get it away from me. It stinks. It's DC. It's not good. Well, little did I realize.
I never thought I'd heard the word stinks with Bernie Wrightson's name attached.
Yeah. Man.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, but you didn't pursue that. You went into illustration. So who was your inspiration there? Guys like, you said TV guide painters. So was Jack Davis?
Yeah, I saw him as more of a comic strip cartoonist, advertising guy. Brilliant. I loved Mort Drucker from Buying Mad magazine. There's two kinds of people in the world. There's the Mort Drucker guys and gals, and the Jack Davis. I'm on the Mort Drucker side. The illustrators really were Bernie Fuchs and Bob Peak and
McGinnis.
Definitely McGinnis paperback covers. The Obama Doc Savage covers were incredible. I used to go buy them and rip the covers off and save them. But unfortunately, illustration sort of went away right as I was graduating from college.
Mm-hmm.
TV Guide used photos, Time, Newsweek, they all started using photos, and illustration almost died. There's a little bit of it now, but comics really took over as art fans, commercial art fans, their outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And some movie posters. I was just over Drew Struzan's studio last week, and he had a really great run of just gorgeous work for movie posters.
Oh, I love his stuff.
Yeah,
I wasn't even sure he was still alive, actually.
Yeah. I live in Burbank. The next town over is Pasadena. He lives in Pasadena.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I won't tell you where in Pasadena because he'll get mad at me.
Well, just tell them that Mark Hamill told me.
Okay. Okay.
So what was your first job? Was it in comics or was it illustration? And I'm curious how you actually got your foot in the door in comics.
My first job outside of college was as an art director for a small Saturday morning cartoon called The Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers. It's something nobody's ever heard of. It was really fun, and it was a short-lived job. And then a couple of my buddies, Kent and George, said, "Man, you're looking for a job. Why don't you go to Marvel?" They were both friends with Archie Goodwin, the great Archie Goodwin.
Oh, Archie, yeah.
Oh man. And they said Kent said Archie's looking for an assistant. Why don't you go? He's the most awesome guy you'll ever meet. Why don't you get an interview with him? And sure enough, I went and I became his assistant.
That's fantastic. I mean, to get your foot in the door under the tutelage of one of the greatest
Yeah.
and nicest guys in comics.
Yeah. You mentioned his name and people just like, oh man, remember Archie? He was so cool. Yeah, I was astoundingly lucky. It was an office job. It was an editorial job. It wasn't really an art job.
Right.
I always had that. I'm one of those people, one of those artists who hates his stuff and thinks he's no good. And even though all my friends would always say, "Hey, get over it, stop," all those years I was scared to draw and let people see my stuff. So I did pursue the editorial.
This is the guy who says his stuff is no good. I just wanted to point that out to the readers or the listeners here for a minute, and we'll go over that a little later. Oops, what did I do with you? There we go.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Having left DC Comics about 2.5 years ago, I went back to illustration, or actually, for the first time in 27 years, I became a full-time illustrator again. And man, that self-doubt is gone. I'm just enjoying drawing. I guess it took a couple of years to get a little older and realize, well, maybe my stuff isn't that horrible. So
yeah, I find that the phrase with age comes wisdom is so very true. Particularly, I think in our field that there is always that self-doubt. There's that I'll never be John Buscema. I'll never be, and you just list your idols down the road, down on a list here. And for me, that always held me back. It wasn't until I basically metaphorically killed my idols in my mind and said, I can do this. I got to do this my way, that I got the confidence. And with the confidence comes the boldness. Because when you're not confident with your work, it shows.
Yeah.
Your trepidous, the line you put down, the color splash that you put down, whatever it may be, the choices you make, it shows. And once you have that confidence, man, it's amazing how fast you can grow.
Yeah, it really is. Unfortunately, you get much older and you're all achy and you don't want to sit at the drawing board that much, even though physically. Yeah.
Well, you got to stand and paint, I guess. Is like
Did you? I've always meant to ask you a question. I apologize for jumping in.
It's a conversation.
Did you ever, when you got the Batman gig, did you say to yourself, "Oh, can I curse on this?"
Yeah.
This okay.
Shit, yeah.
Okay. Did you say to yourself, "Holy shit, it's Batman"? What effect did it have on you to get that gig?
I never said that because I always wanted it. I wanted to draw Batman from the time I was 8 years old watching the Adam West show. And when I got to DC and started to make some connections, I met Archie, showed him stuff. I met Denny, showed him stuff. And then when the call came, to do fill-ins, do some fill-ins on Detective Comics, I was like, yeah, this is really great. It's what I've been working for my entire life. And I never felt I didn't get paralyzed by it, to be honest. Had it been something else, you know, maybe like Superman or maybe that would have paralyzed me a little bit more. But I was so comfortable with Batman that
Wow.
I felt I knew the character. I knew how he moved. I knew, you know, I went right into it, you know.
That's amazing because I think I would have the opposite. I think I would freeze up to get what you've always wanted and then have to sit down and do this stuff.
Well, maybe I should have.
No, you should have you should have done
I mean,
exactly what you did, man. I love that stuff.
it took me a while, you know, to find my own mojo on the strip. You know, but once we got out of the Nightfall stuff that was so continuity heavy, and we
Mhm.
got to do self-contained stories and stuff, and bringing the real Batman back, then it got, you know, then I found that, you know, I found my groove in the character a little bit
Yeah.
more, you know, less derivative, a little bit more original.
You must have felt very, fortunate to work with that editorial crew. I mean, those 4 guys, Denny and Scott Peterson and Gorf and Darren Vincenzo,
Aaron, yeah.
they were great editors. They were exceptional editors.
They were, you know, and Denny taught them well. And it's funny you bring that up. Chuck and I were on a stream this afternoon, and we were talking about the lack of editorial skill sets. Um, and I um, um mentioned that, you know, there used to be uh, a teaching program. You know, it started with Stan, and Stan begat Roy and Len and Marv and Jerry Conway and Archie Goodwin and those guys. And then those guys taught, you know, the Mike Carlins, the Jim Shooters, you know, and it just went down from there. And then at some point, there was a mass exodus of that talent and nobody to teach the next levels after that. I
Mhm.
think really after Denny left, you know, I'm trying to think if there was anybody of that stature teaching the next um, class of editors through. But in my mind, that's when editorial just really took a shit, uh,
Yeah.
from a lack of skill, a lack of understanding of the business and of the art form.
Yeah. There's certainly, you know, and there are a few real good editors, good young editors, but not a lot, man. It's few and far between. And
Look who's
um,
here, Scott Peterson.
and Scott Peterson. We were just
Hey,
talking
Scott.
bad about him.
We're just giving you some love, brother. But there would be that dream gig for Mark, since he did also get Batman and didn't freeze.
Mm, yeah, I don't know. I always wanted to draw Columbo as a comic book, but nobody's gonna buy
Oh,
a nobody's gonna buy a Columbo comic book. Um,
I
yeah,
would.
well, I'd give you a free copy.
Okay.
Um, no, you know, the few times
Thanks, Dan.
I'm oh, there's Dan Fraga.
Yeah.
Uh, I I'm talking with Marvel about doing some Spider-Man stuff, and I'm scared shitless because I was the Spider-Man guy. I loved Spider-Man.
Mhm.
You know, as a kid and throughout my life. John Romita, Gil Kane, Jerry Conway's writing was incredible.
Oh yeah.
I'm a big Ross Andrew fan. I mean, I just love Ross Andrew. Um, and when you sit down, and it ties into that question I asked you, when you sit down to draw, when I sit down to draw Spider-Man, what's it going to look like? You know, you want to draw like Romita, real classic and heroic. You want to draw like, I was never a real big Ditko fan, but you can see his thought process and why he approached
Yes.
it that way. Um, I'd love to be able to draw like Ross Andrew, but I can't draw like any of those artists. How did you approach Batman? Because who were your guys? Who were you a fan of back then?
Uh, uh, Don Newton,
Mm-hmm.
Jim Aparo,
Aparo.
Dick Sprang.
Really sprang, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Sprang. I copied Sprang's drawings incessantly when I was a kid.
Wow.
In fact, I got to tell him that too.
Mm.
When I met him back in I think '95, something like that. Just a really great gentleman. Looked like a wiry cowboy with leather
Oh
skin.
yeah.
He had a
I called him one
handshake.
day. He
Like,
was so nice.
you met him?
Yeah, I called him on the phone one day. He was such a nice guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You should shake his hand. It's like Joe Kubert, you know, like sticking your hand in a vice. you
Uh-huh.
know. But yeah, so those were my main guys. I wasn't a huge. I mean, I like Neil Adams, and I respect what he brought to the character and changed it. But I, I I thought he took sometimes too many risks in his storytelling, and it got to be a little disjointed. Whereas some of those other guys, were much more straightforward and much more clear,
Yeah.
and I like that stuff.
I
Jim
agree with
Aparo,
I agree with everything you just said.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Jim was such a sweetheart of a guy too, just the nicest guy in the world, and very supportive. And just when I look at him in his peak period, there, it's like, pfft, dude's untouchable. I mean, he brought the sensibilities of Kniff and the illustration of Stan Drake
Yeah.
slash Adams into his Batman at that peak period, and it's like, wow.
The storytelling was great. I remember having a conversation with Alex Toth, and I was surprised. He was a real big fan of the Pyro stuff. He loved the Pyro stuff.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
he
cool.
really did. Because and I won't slag on Neil, although never mind. Alex was just not a fan of Neil's stuff. He certainly could appreciate the genius draftsmanship
Right.
and the illustration, but he said, "Mark, it's not comics. He's not telling a story."
Interesting.
I just realized I just slagged on the living legend Neil Neil Adams. I didn't. Alex Toth did. So
There you go. There you go. Do you remember that Toth story that he did for Detective Comics? I think it was the only one he did in Detective. Ghost of the Killer Skies.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
had that great Jim Aparo cover.
yeah,
You know,
totally,
yeah,
totally.
it's really cool to know that he appreciated Jim's work, and
Yeah,
the two of them were sandwiched in that same comic.
yeah. It's a great comic.
Yeah.
That
Plus
there's
Paul
that
Simon, who
splash
was in there
page.
too.
Batman's jumping off a water tower or something, and the cape spells out the word Batman, the name Batman in the photo.
Oh, on the splash page. Yeah.
Oh my god, it's so cool.
Yeah. And then he does that triptych of him falling, and he falls through the water tower, and then he
Yes.
climbs up, and then he just like it's such a naturalistic movement. He just climbs up, and then he looks up at the plane. I got all those images are still in my head. That's
Yeah.
the power of great storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I had a better memory. I just have the worst. I have the world's worst memory, and stuff like that so well, and then when you go back to look at it, you're reminded of everything that you just loved the first time you saw it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the difference between a lot of modern comics and those comics is that it was all storytelling based, visual storytelling. There was an unmatched clarity to it because you couldn't put the kitchen sink into a lot of this stuff just because of the printing processes. Um, and to me, that stuff is much more immersive. And isn't that what storytelling is all about?
It is.
Immersing the reader
It
into the
is.
story.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
You know, was there's too many bells and whistles and too much going on in a lot of stuff today, which I think leaves me cold. But I can look at like Ross Andrew, who was just an amazing, amazing artist,
Yeah.
um, and his New York in Spider-Man was a real New York. I mean, I recognize that. Do you remember that the issue he did? I'm going to sound like a geek now, but it was Spider-Man 138, with the Mind Worm. It was written by Jerry Conway and drawn by Ross. And Spidey has to go out to live with Flash Thompson because his apartment just got blown up, and Flash Thompson lives in the Rockaways. So
In the middle of nowhere.
right, right,
Yeah.
and that's what the Rockaways looked like back
Yeah.
in 1974. It was like a wasteland of buildings that had been torn down, and real estate that was there. There's gaps between houses because houses burned down and stuff. And he captured that in such a way. I was like, because I knew that area. We used to take that drive from Kennedy Airport out to Long Beach, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my god, I recognize this. It didn't look like a John Romita generic New York.
Yeah. 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 Man, it's funny because people people seem to poo-poo the mindworm. I love the mindworm. I mean, he's one of my favorite characters, you know, villains.
What
But I
a
remember
great
years.
design.
What's that?
What a great design.
I know he was so
The head
creepy.
and the teeth and
That's
the
what kids
sandal.
want. Yeah, that's what kids want, man. I remember years and years and years later driving down that street, that boulevard. I guess it was Rockaway. You said it was Rockaway?
It was the Rockaways.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the street was.
I
Could have
was
been
going to
Rockaway
a, I was
Boulevard.
going to yeah, I was going to a party or something out there, and I drove from Brooklyn, and I was like, I had that moment. Holy shit, this is where the mindworm lives. I know it is because it looked the same.
Right.
All right,
Right.
that's enough. That's enough geeking out.
It's like that Roosevelt tramway too. You know, whenever I see that,
Yeah.
all I can think of is, you know, the Punisher and
Nightcrawler.
Nightcrawler. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think you get that in comics anymore. I think everybody. I have to blame guys like artists like Bill Sienkiewicz. You know, Bill is a genius. Bill is, man. I every interview I do, I talk about Bill Sienkiewicz for 40 minutes. You know, and he could break the rules and break the mold and break everything. But I think a lot of people that came after him aren't a genius, and they're not Bill Sienkiewicz. That's
Right.
such a rarity. That's why when I met Darwin, when I kind of discovered Darwin Cook, it was such a throwback to pure storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
I was amazed at how he got it. He understood what comics should be all about.
Right. And the great guys like Dar, at Toth, you know, they make it look easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look at other stuff and you see how complicated they make it, you realize that they don't get it. You know, it's not about what you put in that makes it, it's what you leave out, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
still transmit all the information that you need to your reader to, again, immerse them into the story that you're trying to tell.
I think you hit it on the head too. I think there's not a lot of people who, well, there's not the apprentice system anymore. You can't go work with Wally Wood and sweep his floors, or Howard Chaykin, or any of these great artists, and they smack you in the back of the head and say, don't draw that hand that way.
Right.
Why? There's not the, you talk about Mike Carlin was teaching editors and Mark Grunwald was teaching editors.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That doesn't exist anymore. And I don't blame the editors or the assistant editors. I blame management for not, Paul Levitz instituted a program. Every other week we'd go downstairs and Mike Carlin would talk about how to spot word balloons, where to put word balloons, or Karen Berger would talk about scheduling, or just these kind of mundane things, but the stuff that you had to know to continue that craft.
Yeah, absolutely. Ethan Van Sciver. Hey there, Ethan. Is Mark working on a comic book of his own now? Thanks for all you did for DC, sir.
Wow. Thanks for saying that.
And thanks, Aaron, for the super chat. Appreciate that.
I am. How come I can't see people talking?
There's a, it should say chat in the right-hand side of your screen.
No, I don't see it. It's not that important.
Okay.
Yeah, I am working on 2 different comics projects. One, unfortunately, I really wanted to do, and I pitched to one of the smaller companies, and it got all screwed up. And talk about running across an editor who sucked and kind of ghosted me. And but that may still happen now. But yeah, and I'm talking with Marvel about a Spider-Man thing, which would be fun.
Have you ever thought about, and here comes the pitch, crowdfunding a project?
Well, I did a book on baseball. I'm sure I have a copy someplace. That I conceived and did all the artwork for. It's not a comic; it's a mainstream illustrated book.
Right.
So I did it on Kickstarter, and it was kind of a neat experience. I'll never do it again because I did my own shipping and my own
Fulfillment.
fulfillment, everything. That man, that was a quite the experience. But um, I'm I'm not good at selling myself. I'm sort of a quiet, solitary guy, and I like to sit and draw. And
Mhm,
um, you have to be you have to trumpet yourself these days,
mhm,
and you just have to. It's not egotistical. It's not grotesque, but you have to do it. And I have a hard time doing that.
mhm. Yeah, it definitely is. It requires a lot of different skill sets, because you're the creator, you're the publisher, you're the marketing director, you're all of those things,
Mhm.
fulfillment director, um, gathering up stretch goal tchotchkes and goodies and designing all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Mhm.
there's a lot to it, but the payoff is great because it puts you one on one with your fans and your backers, and you own it.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. I kind of, it's that thing. Like you got to draw Batman. You got to draw Batman. I'm at that age that I don't do anything I don't want to do anymore.
Yeah.
I'm too ornery and curmudgeonly, Um, but I still there are certain toys I still want to play with. I want to do Spider-Man. I want to do Star Trek. I want to do. I just did my first children's book, which comes out next month.
Nice.
Um, yeah, and that was something I don't really care about the money for those things. I just want to do them.
Now you have a book, I saw you post, coming out, is it called A to Z
Yeah,
Monster?
yeah, that's it right there.
Oh, it's already out?
Oh, it's not out. It's printed.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, whoops. How do you do this?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's my first children's book, and it was so much fun to draw. During COVID I did the baseball book, which I had been working on for a couple of years. I finished it up and did the Kickstarter campaign, and then I started drawing this alien book, which a really good friend of mine, Kevin Summers, wrote it for me, with me,
Mhm.
and I just loved doing the artwork. It was sort of like with comics. I think I think people who don't draw comics have no idea how difficult it is. Perspective and lighting and acting. Oh my God, and as I'm finding out as I'm in the studio, it's a lot of work, but reference for backgrounds and
Mhm.
um, with this children's book, it was monsters. So I'd wake up, I'd run downstairs to the studio, and I would draw Frankenstein or I would draw the Wolfman. Didn't need reference because it's all in your head.
Right,
That was,
right. That's
I think,
fun.
man, that was so much fun. And if you can have fun doing what we do, that's cool.
Yeah. Now, where will those books be, uh, for people, in the chat and watching the show so that they can buy it?
Yeah, we're going to announce Flesk Publications is publishing it. John Flesk, awesome guy.
Okay.
Um, he's going to be posting, I think in a week or 2 weeks, he will be posting all the information on how to get it. He's doing a like pre-order through Kickstarter. So
Okay.
so you're not really funding it. You're kind of buying it through Kickstarter, but then it'll be available once it's out. It'll be available through Flesk Publications, and it'll be on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, all that
Oh,
stuff.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So you hear that, folks? You gotta buy that book. It looks amazing, and it's got monsters in it. So, you know, get out there
and it
and
was
buy
so
that.
much fun. It was so much fun. And my girlfriend the other day asked me, "Why did you do monsters?" And I said, I don't know. I've loved monsters since I was a little kid, and I think spooky stuff. It's a book for kids, so it's not
Mhm.
scary, but it's spooky. There's a big
Right,
difference.
right,
And I thought of uh, when we were kids and we first saw the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown cartoon Halloween special.
right.
That spooky feeling is you try to recapture that in your artwork sometimes, and that's why I wanted to do this book
It,
after all these years.
it's atmosphere. It's capturing that atmosphere.
Yeah.
and from the few drawings that I've seen of it, it's like I'm like, oh my god, this is so great. I think that that's a great uh, example is the Charlie Brown thing, because that did have so much atmosphere, the painted skies, the darkness, that fall colors, and the
Yeah.
pumpkins, and the all the various aspects of Halloween were represented in that cartoon. It wasn't scary, but it felt Halloweeny, you know.
And I was born on Halloween, so I have special license to draw
Oh,
this stuff.
so my 31 Days of Monsters ends on your birthday.
It does. It
That's
does.
cool.
Did you have your first one? I think I saw you did your first one today?
No, no. Tomorrow is the kickoff. I have Gary Girani on, who wrote Pumpkinhead.
He's actually a real good friend of mine. He's an awesome guy.
Oh, fantastic. Here's a funny thing. Remember I mentioned the Monster Times?
Yeah.
Before I got into comics, I was reading the Monster Times.
Yeah.
Well, Gary used to write for the Monster Times, and I knew his name before I knew Jack Kirby's.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I
That's
knew
cool.
Jack's work, but I didn't know who did it. But I knew who Gary Girani was because he wrote that article about Godzilla in the Monster Times.
Yeah. Yeah. We used to
I'm
until
thrilled to
COVID.
have him on.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, until COVID happened, every Saturday, Gary, myself, and a really good friend, Steve Mitchell, the old inker, the old time inker,
Oh yes,
would
Steve
go to.
inked my first issue of Detective Comics.
Did he really?
Yeah, Tech
Oh man,
650.
man, he's a killer guy. He's a great guy, real
That's
sweetheart.
fantastic.
Yeah, but we go to lunch. We would go to lunch every Saturday, and I had a book, talk about the Monster Times. I had this book it was a softcover book called Fantastic Television. And it was the first book that came out that sort of did episode guides of all the cool shows, the Night Stalker and the Twilight Zone and all this Outer Limits, all this stuff. And I loved that book as a kid. Gary wrote that book.
Oh,
And I'm
okay.
like, I can't believe you wrote that book.
Well, I'm going to name drop you tomorrow when I'm talking to him.
Okay, please do.
Should I give him a message?
Tell him he owes me a hamburger.
Okay, I will. I'll definitely tell him that. That's so fantastic. Hey, Mark Nelson is here too. Do you know Mark?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark.
Mark's a great, great artist.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So how many years did you work at DC?
27 years. 27 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I started in 93-ish. I remember it was around the OJ trial.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was there a good long time. And it was a really good place to work. Worked with some, you mentioned Scott Peterson and Gorf and Archie and all these really great people. Mike Carlin, really good friend. It was a good place to work for a long, long time.
It was. What happened?
Corporate America happened.
Corporate America. Yeah. I tell the story about, DC was a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, even back in the 90s, but they were self-contained publishing company that focused on publishing. But so it felt like a small company because of people like Paul Levitz and Dick Giordano and, Bob Greenberger. And, there's all these guys working to keep the wheels turning there.
Yeah.
And I remember when we were going to buy a house and I needed a down payment for it. And DC gave me an interest-free loan against my royalties that they knew were coming on Detective Comics. It was just a couple sheets of paper. There was no big, thing. They sent it out to me. They cut me the check, and then they just deducted that from the royalties each month until it was paid off. You don't see that now. I mean, that would be unheard of.
They'd laugh. They'd laugh in your face if you wanted.
You want what?
Yeah.
You want us to give you money?
Yeah.
But that's what I loved about working at DC back then. I had a really substantial royalty check get eaten by my dog. And I had to call, Pat Bastian up and tell her that my dog ate it, and
Oh no.
she just laughed, you know, she says, "I know this is true because nobody would make this story up."
You'd make up a better story than that. Yeah, more believable.
Exactly, exactly, and so Pat took care of it, and
Yeah.
guys like Roger Rivera, you know, another, you know, I said to you when you left DC that you and then eventually Roger was the final nail in the coffin for me,
Yeah.
as far as stand-up people that knew what they were doing. They were just great guys. And then when they let you go, you know, it was just a rubber stamp company anymore, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's still, like I said, there are still a few really good people there. The gal who runs the production department, Allison Gill, she's been there a long time. She's the greatest person. She's one of us. She's one of the old school people. Real responsible, real, uh, you know. But it was going that way. You know, people who care were being outnumbered by those corporate climbers. You know, the
Yeah.
like, you know, and I don't want to get off onto too much of a tangent, but like any corporate entity, there's a few talented people, there's a few people who really care, but there's a lot of people who aren't really good at anything other than keeping their jobs.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there are a few really high up guys and gals who all day long they've just sat around thinking how to make themselves look good and how to make you look bad. And it was real disappointing. I was, between us, since we're just me and you talking, I was looking to leave DC. I
Yeah.
just wasn't having a good time anymore.
Well, that's a great benchmark, you know, if like you said, at our age, you know, you got to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah,
You know, you have to be passionate about it, and you know, life is short and just got to enjoy it, you know.
yeah.
Here's a question for you. Um, Jasper Plan 9, thank you for the 4.99 super chat. Ask Mark the book design work and curating work he did for DC. Whose idea was Batman Black and White? I want all the details. I love that series.
I'm happy to say that was my idea. I was the art director and I was the design director. Um, and every now and then I'd have 5 free minutes to edit something. Like Paul Levitz liked when I would put my editorial taste on something. And so did Dan DiDio when we first started working. You know, and I figured for Batman Black and White, I figured Batman's the best character ever. Everybody loves Batman. People kind of like anthology stories. You know, you can read one 8-pager and put the book down. And I always liked black and white work. I was a big fan of the creepy and eerie, the old Warren magazine
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
So I pitched it, and Paul Levitt said, "No, I don't like the idea. No, it's not going to make money." And I was sort of like, I didn't get it. Why not? Those are great. You know, if I hire the greatest writers and artists in the business, and I did, I got Mobius and John Buscema and Alex Toth and Jim Lee, all these great artists. But initially, Paul said, "No, it's not going to make money." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "Well, the last black and white comic we didn't make much money." I said, "Well, what was that?" It was a John Byrne Omac series.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's, talk about apples and oranges. Batman and Omac, it's two different things.
Right.
And he eventually acquiesced and let me do it, and I'm really proud of that. That was
Yeah.
and Scott Peterson, Mike Carlin, in all his wisdom, put Scott as my co-editor just so I wouldn't screw up the character. I wouldn't screw up Batman. I wouldn't screw up his character.
I'm not angry that I never got to do a black and white story. I'm just putting that out there.
Okay. You didn't do one for me? I thought you did one for me.
No.
Wait a minute. I called you one time and asked you to do one. I know I called you one time and you couldn't do it. You said no.
I don't remember that.
I know for a fact.
Huh.
Because Scott Peterson said, "You're going to call Graham, aren't you?" And I was like, "Shit, yes, of course I'm going to call Graham." And I had my list of 60 names and you were on that list. and I
Ah,
called you, and you told me no.
God, trying to what the hell would have been working on then? Wow.
I asked you, I was gonna ask Chuck to write it and you to draw it.
Mhm.
You told me no, and I got Chuck, and Chuck did write it, but I got a different artist to draw it.
Oh, wow, I don't even remember that, but, I believe you, you know?
Yeah.
I must have had something else going. Alright, so I take it back, although I did say I wasn't angry, so I'm not angry.
Okay.
Hey, Ethan, I'm not lying, I'm just forgetful. Jesus. That's funny. So, what are you working on right now?
Um, a bunch of non-comics illustration, um, stuff I wish I could talk about. Really kind of fun stuff, but I signed NDAs and all that stuff.
Oh, okay.
Um, I'm ramping up to do that project that I mentioned that I got screwed on. They asked me again to do it, and I think I probably will. It's based on an old TV show, and that's all I can really say on it. It's not
Oh,
it's not Columbo.
it's not Columbo.
It's
Alright.
not it's not my two favorites. It's not The Night Stalker or Columbo, but it is a great TV show.
Is it from the '70s or the '60s?
The 60s, the late 60s.
Late '60s.
Yeah.
Alright. The Invaders!
No, it was a bigger science fiction show than The Invaders.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've been sort of ramping up and drawing those characters a lot, and William Shatner is very difficult to draw. But
But he's going into space, you know. Did you see
okay,
that?
okay, okay.
Yeah.
What's he, like, 90 years old or
He's
something?
91. He's gonna be the oldest man to ever go in space. He's going up with Jeff Bezos next month.
I saw something about that.
Yeah.
He's got
I
to be
think
the
that's
oldest.
amazing.
He's got to be the oldest person by far to go in space. 91?
John Glenn was the oldest prior,
Oh,
to
that's right. Yeah, he
Shatner
went
going
back
up.
up. That's right. He went
He
back
was
up.
in his 80s.
That's right.
Yeah. But,
Hmm.
yeah, I think that that guy's a renaissance man. I mean, the guy is 91 years old. He's sharp as a tack. He's still physically robust. Uh, and I love the idea that Captain Kirk is going into space, you know?
That's crazy. That's
Yeah,
crazy. I love that. Yeah, that's really great.
I
He
wouldn't
sh-
go.
he should wear the tunic and with the whole.
That would be awesome. He should
Yeah,
bring something, a phaser or a communicator,
he probably will. He probably will.
Yeah, he'll probably sell it at his next con for like $1 trillion.
Yeah, like he doesn't
Spend in
have enough
space.
money.
Yeah, it's true. What was your favorite TV show as a kid?
My three favorite TV shows were Columbo, Columbo, and Columbo. I love Columbo. It's my favorite TV show. I liked I love The Night Stalker with Darren
Mhm.
McGavin. Love that show. I actually had lunch with McGavin 20 years ago,
No kidding.
25 years ago. My goal in life was to do The Night Stalker as a comic book. And I couldn't figure out who had the rights. I couldn't get any leverage on it. And then I did some consulting work for Topps, the baseball card company. They did their own imprint of comics for a short period of time, and I worked on a comic with Mike Mignola for them.
Okay.
And they would call me and ask me. It was a fledgling company. It was a new company, and they needed advice on business practices in comics. So I would chat with them, and they appreciated it. And one fella named Ira uh, said, "Hey, what are you doing after this Mignola project?" I said, and I told them the story. I've always wanted to do this. And he said, "Well, we'll put our lawyers on it." And sure enough, they got the rights to the Night Stalker. And I asked Walt Simonson to write it, and he said yes. And we called McGavin and said, "Hey, can we take you to lunch?" And because he had an apartment in New York, he and his wife had an apartment in New York. So we took him to the Russian Tea Room next to Carnegie Hall, and I had lunch with Darren McGavin. I had lunch with the Night Stalker. The project fell apart because the fellow who owned the rights was kind of a strange
Hmm.
sort of dude, and I'll leave it at that.
What
But
year was that?
I'd say around 94, 95.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Um, and but sitting next to Darren McGavin, I don't know if many people who are listening to this know who he was. He was this great actor. And he's telling stories, and we were at a big table, and he's kind of like telling stories and punching me in the arm while he's telling stories, and I'm like, oh my god, it's Carl Kolchak, the Night Stalker, punching me in the arm. It was cool. It was really quite a dream to do that.
If you don't know him from Kolchak the Night Stalker, I know you've seen him in The Christmas Story, people. He's the father in the Christmas Story, and
Yeah,
that's on, on a 24-hour loop on
the one about the kid who shoots his eye out with a BB gun. He plays
right.
the dad.
Yeah, he's the dad. Yeah, and he's been in a million movies.
Yeah.
The other one was The Natural too, with Robert Redford, about baseball.
Yep, love that movie.
Which you're a fan of baseball, just like me.
Big fan.
Yeah, who's your team?
I just stopped watching last year. I got fed up.
Yeah.
The Yankees. I was a Yankee nut.
Yeah, me too.
And then when I moved to Los Angeles, I became a Dodger fan. They became my National League team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
How about you?
Yankees. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I used to wear number 7 when I played ball as a kid. I had a Mickey Mantle glove. Yeah, even though I lived on Long Island, everybody was a Mets fan. I was a Yankees fan.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been a Yankee fan my whole life. I was a big Tom Mattingly fan. I really thought he was a great player.
Yeah, the dynasty years in the 90s were amazing.
Yeah.
I remember the first game Derek Jeter played in.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. Tony Hernandez was the shortstop, and he was out. And Bobby Mercer was the commentator. He was talking about this kid that just came up from AAA. He's a guy to watch. This is young Derek Jeter, and it was at the end of the '95 series. They're in the playoffs against Seattle, and Hernandez was out. Jeter was in. They went like one round in the playoffs and got knocked out by Seattle. But then the next year they started their run, and Jeter started as shortstop. Pretty amazing.
The good old days. I love baseball. I really, so much of my life is intertwined with it, playing it and being a fan of it. And the greed and the steroids and the shitty front offices and the commissioner being an asshole, I just can't do it anymore. Yeah. Cheating the Astros, it. I know I look like I'm getting upset. I am. I take it personally.
What killed me this year was watching baseball become NASCAR. I mean, I'm watching a pitcher, and they've got a computer-generated advertisement on the freaking pitcher's mound.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. Why don't you wear an STP sticker on your shoulder too,
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks. The whole thing with Pete Rose, bet on baseball, so he's banned from baseball. Yet now Major League Baseball sponsors betting on baseball.
Right. Like FanDuel, that type of stuff?
Yeah, like, wait a minute, what? Then let Pete Rose into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And there's Nike logos on everybody's jersey.
Yes, that's the other thing I hate is the Nike logos.
Man.
And even the Yankees, the team that didn't even put their players' names on the backs, we got the stupid swoop on there,
I hate it.
Yeah.
Well, we should go back to talking about comics, because most comics people don't like baseball, don't like sports.
That's true. Somebody here just said F the Phillies, so that might have been directed towards Ethan, because he's a Phillies fan.
Probably a Philly fan wrote
that. It is. Here we go. Here's Ethan. I knew he had something to say about the Phillies.
Yeah.
Oh man, are you reading any comics these days?
Or
do you get depressed like I do when I see a lot of this stuff?
I hadn't been in the comic shop in 2 years, and I went just a little while ago. And I'll see something that I think the artwork looks really great. Like there was a Superman. They did a takeoff on Batman Black and White. I think it's like Superman Red and Blue or something like that.
Okay.
And Dustin Nguyen did a story in there, and I love his work, so I picked it up. Beautiful, beautiful story, real graphic looking.
Mhm.
Um, I, I won't tell you how distressed and disappointed I was at going into a comic shop. There's some great artists. There's some incredible artists working in
Mhm.
comics, and there's some great writers too, but
Mhm.
they're few and far between. Um, I hate to slag on anybody. Actually, I enjoy slagging on people, but I don't. I
My
try
kind
not.
of guy.
Yeah, I try not to be judgmental, but I'm actually very judgmental.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
But I
that's all.
think the judgmentalism, and I'll speak for myself here, comes from passion because this is all I ever wanted to do since I was 12 years old, is I wanted to draw comics. I wanted to tell stories, and this was the medium I chose. And when I see people deliberately working against the art form and the business and trying to drag it down, it gets me angry. It
Yeah,
really gets me angry. And I got no problem slagging those people that are trying to ruin my career, my hobby, my love and my passion.
yeah, yeah. There are some young artists who are really passionate about stuff. Cliff Chang is just such a sweet guy, such a great guy, and such a great artist. There's some great art. Anytime Tim Sale still does something, I love it. Adam Hughes.
Mhm.
Lee Weeks. Lee
Oh, yeah,
Weeks.
Lou's
It's like
fantastic.
it's like who's this kid Lee Weeks? He's this new guy Lee Weeks. It's
Lee and I were classmates at the Cubert School.
were you really?
Yeah, yeah.
Jesus. He did a story for us for I got to stop saying us. I don't work at DC Comics anymore. He did a story for DC the year I left or the year before. It was Batman meets Elmer Fudd.
Oh, yeah. Mhm,
Did you see that thing?
mhm.
It was
Yeah,
like a class in how to tell a story.
yeah,
It was so great.
yeah. And he's teaching at the Cubert School now, so there's, young artists coming out, that are getting it from a master, so that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, the fella running the Kubert School, Anthony Marquez, is a real great guy. He's really doing some cool stuff with that school.
He just sent me a copy of Joe Kubert's text. I did a show on Joe Kubert, a couple weeks ago,
Nice.
just to, you know, uh, give some love back to the one of the greatest storytellers this medium has ever had. And I had fellow students and guys that went to the Kubert School on, and we talked about him for a couple hours. And
Mm.
I mentioned that I didn't never had that book, that textbook, not textbook, but the text,
That's
the Western.
yeah.
And Anthony was kind enough to send that to me.
Well, Joe Kubert gave me a copy, and I have it here somewhere. He signed it to me, so
Oh, nice.
I beat you on that one.
Well, I got a copy of Tour Number One signed by Joe.
Oh,
What?
do you really? Okay. That's funny.
I brought it to him when I was at the school, and I said, "Would you sign this for me?" He goes,
Yeah,
"Sure, kid."
Joe Kubert. Here's my inevitable question, and I have to ask you: the Mount Rushmore of comic artists. Who are the 4 guys or gals on your Mount Rushmore of comics?
And Mount Rushmore defining them as what?
You define it however you want. Your favorite, or or the greatest of all time, or I think more
Okay.
so that had the biggest impact on the medium.
Okay. Um, Jack Kirby, Will Eisner. 4?
I'm not going to let you have Eisner because he was a strip artist. He wasn't a comic book artist per se. So take Eisner back.
All right, I'll take Eisner back.
I did say
Your
comic.
game. It's your game. I'll play. Okay. I'll put Kirby,
Mhm.
Wood, Wally Wood.
Wally Wood, yeah.
Yep. Joe Kubert
Mhm.
and I want to put Bernie Kriegstein on there.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know that his impact is that strong. I mean, his output wasn't that great.
Yeah.
Um, so you know what I'll do is I'm gonna throw Roy Crane in. Oh
Interesting.
wait, that's Strip.
Oh, that's strips. Yeah,
And
that's
I can't
strips.
use
Oh
Strip.
man.
But he's the
Yeah.
father of the adventure strip, which gave birth to the comic book. So that's why I was going to put Crane in. But uh,
But then how do
yeah,
you put Crane in and not put Kniff or Sickles in?
right,
See, so
right,
that's why I did you a favor by
right.
taking the strip guys out.
All right, you're tough, man. All right. All right, so I got
In the
Wood.
fucking game.
I got I got Wood. I got Kirby. I got Kubert. And
Kirby's the absolute no-brainer. He's the Babe Ruth, right?
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's an automatic induction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, who do you have so far? You have Kirby, Wood,
Kirby, Wood, and Kubert.
Hubert. Oh, you have one more. Now,
All right.
I'll remind you of something.
Okay.
Those artists are mainly artists from the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
You're blowing off the 80s, 90s, aughts, and teens, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You're blowing off 40 years of comic artists. There are no modern modern artists you're going to put on Mount Rushmore?
Well, I guess I was probably locked into the period that I grew up with. But yeah, I would have then thinking forward that way, I'd have to say the biggest impact since then was probably Frank Miller.
Mm-hmm.
I'd put
Mm-hmm.
him on.
Yeah. I could see that.
Yeah.
Huh.
All right, now it's my game. Give me your 4.
Yeah, I don't want to play. I can't play.
Run up the bench.
Alex Toth, and Alex Toth.
Shit, I forgot Alex Toth.
Well, Steve
But
Mitchell and my buddy Steve
wasn't.
and I have played this before, and Kubert and Toth are interchangeable, I think. If you got to have one of the two.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get away with not having Neil Adams. I was never a Neil fan because I was the Marvel kid.
Mm-hmm.
I never fell under his thrall. But I think a really good argument could be made for Jim Lee. He sort of represents the incredibly successful, incredibly influential, for good or bad, modern comic book artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But if you have Frank, you wouldn't have Jim, and if you have Jim, you wouldn't have Frank on this list.
Right. And you wouldn't have Frank if you didn't have Eisner.
Yeah.
So Eisner gets in there anyway.
Okay. Okay.
See what I did there?
I saw what you did there. Isn't it weird that we kind of do this for a living, that we sit around and talk and draw, and we're pretty lucky people?
I thank God every day that I chose this path, or this path chose me, because I can't imagine doing something else. I mean, I did a lot of jobs and I sucked at all of them.
There's a picture of you and you're a kid and you're standing next to somebody famous. Is it Stan Lee, or is it Kirby, or is it Frazetta? Somebody. And you look like you're like 17 years old. You look like you're 16 years old.
Oh, that was probably Chuck Connors.
Chuck Connors, the rifleman.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I'm a big Rifleman fan, and I saw that not too long ago, and I was like, holy shit, he met Chuck Connors.
Yeah. Yeah. I had dinner with him. I was young looking, but I was in my late 20s.
Oh,
when
wow.
That picture was taken. Yeah. He was so awesome. What a powerful personality.
Yeah.
He was telling me about working on The Big Country with William Wyler and Charlton Heston, and working with John Wayne, and he was really, really cool. And I brought him my Winchester. I got a Winchester lever action 30-30 rifle, and I brought that into the convention for him to sign it.
No kidding. Does it have that round thing on the bottom?
Well, it doesn't have it doesn't have that modified loop that he had, so that he could turn it.
Yeah.
It has the standard loop.
But it's the real gun. It's a real firing gun.
Oh, it's a real gun. Yeah, it's a
Oh, that's pretty
30-30.
cool. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. There's a place here in Burbank called something hats, like starts with a B, like Bronson hats or Bromfield hats, and they make a lot of the hats for movies,
Okay.
Clint Eastwood's hats and blah blah blah. Um, and on the wall they have three of those. What was it? A Remington? You said
It was a Winchester.
Winchester. They have three Winchesters where you can buy. There's a guy here in Southern California who takes the real gun and he puts that round stock thing on it, that
Oh, uh-huh.
flippy thing on it. And I'm I I'm kind of anti-gun. I collect a couple, but I don't shoot them.
Mhm.
Um, but I thought real hard about spending the $3,000 to get an exact rifleman reproduction.
Well, here's what would happen. I'm going to tell you this. You're not 6'6" or 6'5", and whether you have that loop or not, you don't have Chuck Connor's long arms. You
That's
will
true.
that the barrel of that rifle is going to come back and smack you right in the mouth. I guarantee you.
All right, I wasn't
I've
going to
already
shoot it
tried it.
anyway. That's great.
I've taken
I gotta tell
mine
you,
and I've extended it out like this, and I'm like, oh shit, this is going to whack me in the nose if I get
wow.
this.
Oh my God, wow. That was such a great show. I'll tell you a real quick story. So my 1960, my mom was pregnant. She was going to give birth to me and my dad, and took her to the hospital. They were leaving to go to the hospital to give birth to me. And my mom turns to one of my two brothers, my oldest brother, Paul, who's watching television. And my mom says, we're going to go get the baby from the hospital. What should we name? I think it's a boy. What should we name the boy? What should we name your new brother? And my brother Paul's watching television, and he looks at television, and the rifleman is on. And he goes, name my brother Mark, like the rifleman's son. I'm named after Mark. Here's where the story gets weird. I found out about 2 years ago that Johnny Crawford, who played Mark, lived a block away from my house here in Burbank. He was in a block. He was in an assisted living home, and he unfortunately had dementia.
Yeah.
And I was going to go see him, but then COVID hit. I found out we were in the middle of COVID. I couldn't go to see him, and he just passed away about 6 months ago.
Yeah, yeah. That is so great because that kid is the son everybody wanted. When you watch that series, he is such a good son. He listens to Paul and does what he's told, and he's just such a cute kid. And
he's a good guy. He's a good kid. And I'll tell you, our conversation comes full circle. That's what's missing with comics. Watch an episode of The Rifleman. They were half-hour shows. They were morality tales. There was a beginning, a middle, and end. They said if so-and-so picks up that special gun to shoot the guy at the end, they will have shown you that gun 20 minutes earlier. They set up and they pay off. It's storytelling. And the great TV shows and the great movies are storytelling, and the great comics are storytelling.
Yeah, and in those half-hour shows like that, there's no fat. I mean, they set it up immediately. Some guy rides into town, he's got a bad disposition, and and all of a sudden he's looking for Lucas McCain. Well, what's going to happen between the beginning and the end. Somebody's going to get shot.
Yeah.
I completely agree. The comic that I'm working on right now, Alien Alamo, is based on The Rifleman. It's a relationship. Yeah, the father and son relationship is what I base that story on. Wow. About this, damaged World War II vet and his son in 1957 on their ranch in Texas, and it was inspired by that relationship between Lucas and Mark.
No kidding. Is that I've seen a bunch of artwork on that. It looks gorgeous. Is that on Kickstarter?
Indiegogo.
Oh, Indiegogo. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. That's the preferred platform. It allows you to keep it up even after the campaign closes in what's called in demand. So you can keep it up there as long as backers still continue to back it.
Oh, neat.
And I continue to keep it up there usually just before I'll close it down, just before I start to fulfill it.
Nice. Oh, I'll have to go on and back it.
Appreciate it, bud.
Your
Yeah,
work
you'll
looks
like it.
great. I've seen. Who's your colorist? You have a really good colorist working on that.
Greg Wright.
It's Greg.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, there you go.
yeah, yeah. I got Elizabeth Breitweiser did the cover, and
Hmm.
Greg is doing the interior.
Wow, two great colorists.
Oh,
She's
absolutely.
great, and Greg's always been great.
Yeah, I always loved Greg's color theory. Like he was inking or coloring Kelly Jones on Batman, and I don't remember who was coloring me on Detective, but I always liked Greg's stuff. And then when I had the chance to hire him for Joe Frankenstein, which I did for IDW,
Yeah,
um, we just clicked, and so we used him for Bane Conquest, and now I'm using him here because
nice.
he's a great guy and just a really great
Yeah, we
color.
worked at Marvel back in the day together.
Yeah, yeah, he
Yeah,
was an editor and colors. Hey,
yeah.
Dennis Cowan's here.
Wow, the
Hey,
Dennis.
Dennis. Yeah, I had Dennis on the show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, yeah.
Talk
That
about,
was a fun
talk about great
conversation.
artists.
Great artist, and there's a guy that loves comics too.
Yeah.
He loves to talk about the artists. You know, uh, just really enjoyed. Oh, look who else just popped in.
There's Greg Wright. There's Mr.
your,
Wright.
your ears must have been ringing, Greg. That's great. Uh,
I'm reading all the cool comments.
oh, you were able to access it?
Yeah, I figured it out.
Okay, good. Christina Lynn says, I tried to watch The Virginian, but it had too much filler in an hour and a half episode. Yeah, that's the
Fine.
problem with some of those. The hours and the hour and a half ones, you know, there is a lot of filler,
Yeah.
a lot of traveling. People go from point A to point B, and we have to watch them do it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get that in the half hours. It's like, man, they're there.
What's your favorite TV show of all time?
It would be Star Trek.
Original Star Trek?
Original Star Trek. Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
A close second is um, The Rifleman,
yeah.
and after that's Combat.
Combat.
Yeah.
Combat. I was just talking about. I mentioned Steve Mitchell, my buddy, a couple of times. He wrote the not he wrote the comic. He did all the interviews on the box set, uh, the DVD box set of Combat.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he interviewed all those people.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I wish I could find that show on TV because that ran I think 6 years. Um, it was I mean you can see where Steven Spielberg stole all the stuff for Saving Private Ryan
Yeah, of course.
from Combat.
Yeah. Um, the box set is really good. It's got everything. And Vic Morrow was such a good actor. Um, I watched I watched this movie on Amazon Prime the other night. It was a made-for-TV movie I saw when I was a kid about Alan Alda goes to prison for murdering somebody and kind of gets raped in prison by Vic Morrow. It was like 1973, you know, that made-for-TV kind of movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What was that called?
It's called The Glass House. It was based on a book by a novel by or a short story by Truman Capote.
Oh wow.
And I kind of remembered it, so I watched it, and I remember, you know how you can sort of oddly remember every scene of something that you saw when you were 11 years old.
Oh yeah. You're in that magic age.
Yeah,
You know, like that's when I discovered comics. I was 12 years old. You
yeah.
know?
That's 11 and 12 are the best years of your life.
Yeah. No responsibility.
Hmm.
Uh, but you got a little bit of um, freedom,
That's right.
you know, and you're starting to discover shit in your life.
Yeah,
You know, yeah.
comic books, not girls yet, but comic books and baseball cards.
Yes. Did
And
you flip cards?
sure,
You had to
absolutely.
in New Jersey. You had to flip cards.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I still collect a couple baseball cards here and there. They're too expensive though.
Yeah. I was at Cooperstown recently, and they have some of those Holy Grail baseball cards that you can see.
Yeah.
And they've got I think it's the Honus Wagner card. It was like one of those cigarette cards.
Yep.
Uh, and the price is just outrageous on
Oh,
how
it's
much
always that card. What's there 9 in existence or millions and
something
millions
like
of
that.
dollars.
Yeah, and
Mm.
it's like over $1 million or something like that. It's crazy for this little shitty
I know.
piece of cardboard, you know.
And you know the story behind that, right? Why it's so rare?
I believe I do. Had to do with the boat sinking, or they threw all the copies overboard,
No, he was they came in. You bought a pack of cigarettes and it was stuck in the pack of cigarettes, and you'd give it
right?
to your kid. He didn't smoke, and he said, "I don't smoke. I don't want to advocate smoking. You got to not do this anymore." And
Oh, okay.
they stopped printing them. Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I think it's the Mickey Mantle rookie card that the
Yeah.
reason it's so rare is because there was like cases of them that got tossed overboard, um, something on a ship where they
Oh
got,
wow.
yeah, it's some crazy story about, and it might have had to do with tariffs or something like that, and they just decided to chuck them, and
Man.
I'm pretty sure it was the Mickey Mantle one. I can't remember. It's been a few months, but it was one of those cards that was in that thing.
Yeah. I wish they weren't so expensive, the old ones. I'd love to buy some of the ones I had when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah. I had the entire 69 Mets,
Oh,
including the
cool.
team cards when I was a kid. And you know
Mhm.
what I traded them for? Uh Casper Comics, Two Gun Kid, these Marvel Western comics
Mhm.
and Harvey humor comics.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't a good businessman, I guess.
I'm still not. I'm one of those artists who just is a moron when it comes to business.
Well, but you could say that, okay, it started my love of comics. Can't make a living in sports cards. I
Yeah,
wasn't going to be playing center field for the Yankees. I knew that early on.
that's true. Although I have made money on sports cards. I did a set of cards in 1989 on the old Negro leagues, the old black ball players, and
That's
actually,
fun.
yeah, in that corner, then it was done as a book. Yeah, that's all the cards right there. Um,
Yeah, this is a good place to dovetail because I wanted to make sure we showed your website, which is markchiarello.com, and you can go there and take a look at Mark's incredible artwork. Are these watercolors, Mark?
they are, yeah, those are
Yeah,
all watercolors. Yeah,
nice.
thank you. I met a couple of the old players that were in their 80s and 90s. Um, Not many around anymore. Very few, if any, are around.
Yeah, I would imagine not.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to show this one here because the
Oh,
Mad
that's
Monster Party is on my list for 31 Days of Monsters this year, gang. So we'll be talking about it. But Mark killed this. Look at this. I just
that
all
was fun.
the
That
great
was
Harvey Kurtzman and Jack Davis designs, and
Yeah. A lot of people have never heard of that movie. It's kind of a hidden gem. I think it had a real influence on what's his name, Nightmare Before Christmas. Why
oh,
Tim
Tim
Burton.
Burton.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he must have loved that because you could tell that's where Nightmare Before Christmas sprung from.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we knew about it because they used to play it all the time in the tri-state area.
Yeah,
At Halloween time or on even on like creature features,
yeah,
you know,
yep, yep.
WOR or what's it, PIX channel
Yeah,
11.
Channel 5, 9, or 11, they played it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, if you grew up in the tri-state area, yeah, you would see that. I want to show some of Mark's. Here we go. Comic book covers. These is great. I had forgotten about this series, but this was an incredible series. The covers by you, the story by James Robinson, and
Yeah,
Tony Salmon's interior artwork is unbelievable.
yeah.
It's so fluid. It's so kinetic. Um, there's a guy. that, I don't know what happened to him, but boy, he was good.
He was really unique. I mean, he was so talented. Kind of a, I'll be politic, kind of an interesting fella. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I love that series. I colored the interiors. I colored Tony on that series, and I really loved working on that.
Yeah, look at that. Look at the great design elements on this. Oh, Brett Blevins inked this one. I didn't even
No,
know.
Tony flaked out on the last issue, and they had to have Brett come in and do like the last 8 pages or 11
Oh, okay.
pages. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Tony Salmons ended up screwing Archie Goodwin on that, and
Uh, yeah, I mean, there are stories of that abound of his inability to produce.
yeah,
But it's a shame, when you're that talented and you can't get the shit out.
yeah. It's hard. It's hard to sit down and do this stuff.
Yeah. I look at the guys like Buscema and Kirby and I'm not going to say Ramita because he wasn't that prolific, but those guys, they had their styles down and they had their craft so that when the muse wasn't hitting them to make that perfect panel, they had
Yeah,
craft to fall back on
yeah.
to get them over that hump and meet
They,
that monthly deadline.
they had the mortgage to fall back on. They knew they need to. I remember I met Buscema. I met John once. Um, I had him do a Batman cover for me, and I called him, and we hit it off. And then I ran into him in San Diego Con, and I said, "Let me ask you." He was such a cool guy, such like a New Yorker.
Yeah.
I cursed in front of him once. I said, "Really, no shit," and I caught myself. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and he laughed at me like, "The fuck are you talking about? No, don't worry."
I'm from Brooklyn. What do you
I
care?
know. But I said to him, I got to ask you, how long does it take you to draw a page? He goes, here's what I do. I sit down, I take off my wristwatch, and I put it on my lamp, and I notice what time it is. And when 2 hours is done, the page is done. No matter what it looks like, I'm done, and I go to my next page. That's
That's
old school, man. That's working class.
yeah, yeah. Well, I had JR on the show
Oh, wow.
last month, and he told me that Buscema came up to him and asked him, how many pages a day do you do? And I don't know, JR said, maybe 2, something like that. And Buscema told him, and I quote, "If you're not doing 5 pages a day, throw away the fucking eraser."
Man, man,
And evidently, Kirby told that to Buscema.
I believe it. I
Yeah.
totally believe it.
Yeah. I mean, again, those
Um,
guys, they were workhorses.
Man, and man, talk about a great artist, Jr. Jr.
Oh, and storyteller.
Oh God, I love his stuff.
He
I
doesn't
was
have to do anything flashy with panel arrangements. He can do a 6-panel grid or 9-panel grid
Yeah.
and make it interesting.
I don't know if you collect the original artwork. I have one page by him that Klaus inked, my good friend Klaus Janson, the brilliant Klaus Janson.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a JR page, and it's just Thor and Hercules walking into a hospital room. Not much happens, but it's so gorgeous. The power of these heroes doing something mundane like walking into a hospital.
Right.
It's pure superheroes.
Right. Because they don't, John doesn't use photo reference. He draws power in imagery.
Yeah.
And so much of the stuff today is so photo referenced, it looks like, just, Joe Muscle guy walking into his gym or something. They don't exude that superpower that Kirby had, that JR and Buscema had adopted.
Yeah. That's why I really liked Walt Simonson's stuff when I first saw it. I was like, wow, this guy understands the power that Kirby would put on a page.
Simonson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Walt's amazing. I mean, you look at his stuff today, and it's better than the stuff was before. I mean, it's like he just keeps accelerating.
Yeah. And talk about a nice guy. Wow, he's got to be. I think there's a battle royale for the nicest guy between Walt Simonson and Kevin Nolan. They're just such great people.
Yeah, Walt was on that Kubert show. He came in and
Oh, cool.
gave some love for Joe.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that was cool. So, all righty. Let's see. We've had you on for about an hour and a half here, my friend.
All right.
You probably got stuff you probably want to do tonight.
Have some
Well,
dinner.
yeah, it's dinner time out
I
there.
didn't talk too much. I know I stepped on your chat a little bit.
What? No, you didn't. No, no, no. These are the best kinds. Is when there's conversations and there's give and take, and when I don't have to dig and pull stuff out of people. You know, I like that. It makes it much more organic and I think enjoyable for the viewers as well. You know.
Oh, cool, cool.
Yeah.
I find the frustrating thing about these is there's so many people you wish you mentioned, like Steranko, and let's talk about Steranko and Dave Johnson and Adam Hughes and all these great.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think there are definitely some really incredibly talented people working in comics. Amanda Connor, I love Amanda's stuff. You know, I wish the companies could kind of get get a little back on track.
Ethan would love to get a Mark Chiarello Cyberfrog cover.
I don't know if I know what Cyberfrog is.
That's Ethan's product that he crowdfunds and created.
Oh, okay.
It's part of his publishing empire, really. It's the cornerstone of it.
Oh, I'll have to look for it. You know, I have to say, I'm embarrassed to admit when I left DC 2 years ago or whatever it was, I had lived comics 24 hours a day for 27 years. And then Marvel before that. I was at Marvel before that. Once I left DC, I kind of I needed a breather, and I didn't go into a comic shop until like 3 weeks ago was the first time I went into a comic shop in 2.5 years.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, somebody's texting me. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I wasn't getting any messages, so I wasn't sure.
But yeah, this was fun. We gotta, you know, next time I'm on the East Coast, we should go out for a cup of coffee.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. And if I get out to the West Coast, I'll definitely ring you up.
Cool.
I don't get out that way too often. I was just in Vegas though. I was doing a signing out there at Torpedo Comics.
Oh, neat. I hear they're really good people, the Torpedo group.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So professional, really, really nice. I really had a great time, and I went out in the desert and shot machine guns. So
oh, wow. Yeah, I know you're a big gun fan. Big gun aficionado.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, you know. But so everybody, I want to thank Mark for coming in and giving us the lowdown on his story and what he's working on today. Look for that book, The A to Z Monster Thing. You'll shoot me the link to it when it comes out, right?
Yeah, I absolutely will. And also, if anybody is friends with me on Facebook, I'll be posting, you know, where and when to get it.
Good.
Order a copy.
Yeah, and
you know, it was fun. I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you might agree that if you could do something that makes you feel like you did when you were 8 years old, 12 years old, it's an awesome thing. And drawing Batman, although it's work, I know you felt that way. And me doing this kid's book about monsters, God forbid, man, it's fun. It's cool.
It is.
You kind of recapture that feeling, that indescribable feeling of, man, remember when you first saw whatever.
Well, you know, when you're in this business long enough, it gets to be, well, like Kirby said, you know, comics will tear your heart out. Because you go into it with such passion and love, and then it sometimes, you know, because of the politics and the business practices and stuff, it sucks the soul and the fun out of it. But you know, if you keep that fire burning, and you have opportunities like you doing the monster book and me self-publishing my own stuff now, I do whatever I want. So I'm having more fun now, 38 years after I started in this business, than I ever have, because I'm doing what I want.
Yeah.
and that passion and that excitement is there. And even at this point in my career, I can say I'm just more excited than ever.
Which is great, which is really great. And hey, maybe the companies, maybe somebody will buy DC Comics and make me run it, and we'll come back, man. We'll do it again.
Oh, it's all that it's waiting for is somebody that's given the scepter and the ability to wield it, uh,
Hmm.
that that has that passion for the
Hmm.
medium.
Yeah,
If that ever happens, I have no doubt they could come back.
I think so. Again, there are some really good people still there, still at Marvel. I'm working with this guy, Ricky Purdon at Marvel, and I was talking to Casada the other night. Really good people, really decent people. There's a small handful of people still at DC. Um, I think it'll come back. I hope it comes
Mhm.
back. Graham, we love this shit way too much for it just to slip away.
Well, exactly. Whether or not these corporate characters can survive, well, they'll survive, but they might be licensed out to other publishers, and whatever. That's fine. It'd be a shame, but that's what it is. But the real future is in the creation of new stuff for new generations,
Yeah,
and getting that out there and getting the fire in their bellies, that
yeah,
we had, because we're now presenting them with stories that immerse them and excite them, and give them that feeling uh, of wonder, you know.
yeah. Yeah, and not just do a stunt. Change
Yeah,
so and so into a whatever. You
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. That's all they ever do. That's the new stuff for them is
Well, it's easy.
gender swapping, race swapping.
It's easy, and you sell a few comics right away, but then you're stuck. I hate when people change the basic concept of a character, the basic makeup of a character.
Right. Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. I don't even recognize half these characters. Batman is a psychopath, who's no better than the people he fought.
yeah,
The idea that he does things for a noble cause is completely gone.
yeah,
Superman at one point gave up America, as his home, and it's like, come on, man, you know, get your shit together.
well, you know, uh, yeah, I remember what the first year I worked at DC Comics, and maybe I'll end the talk on this. The first
Okay.
year I haven't thought about this in quite a while. First year I worked at DC Comics, we had a big meeting of all the employees, all hands, and Paul Levitz called this meeting, and I forget what it was for. Maybe one of our movies came out, and we got to see it for free or whatever. But I absolutely distinctly remember Paul Levitz got up in front of everybody, all of editorial, all of accounting, all of production, everybody, and said, the most important thing that to us is what you do is not the money, not the legacy of publishing. It's not the fans. It's not the what. It's not the entertainment. It's the characters. You have to treat the characters with respect. And I sort of said, no, wait a minute. We're in a business, pragmatic Mark. I'm thinking to myself, we're in a business to make money, aren't we? We can't lose sight of that. And he was not saying that those things aren't incredibly important. You certainly want to make money at what you do. The fans are incredibly important. You want to make them happy. You want to give them a great experience reading a comic book. But the characters are the most important thing. You have to treat them with respect. If you start shitting on Batman, you start shitting on Thor or Iron Man, whoever, you're making a big mistake.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget that. It makes that's for our business, those are words to live by.
Yeah, and we there are no, Denny used to be the gatekeeper, if you will, for all things Batman,
Yeah.
and he so loved the character and understood the character that when people deviated from that, he reeled them back in. I'll tell you a funny story. When we were at one of the Bat conferences, he was at Loggerheads with Frank Miller on Frank's script for Batman Spawn, and
Mhm.
he asked him to make corrections. And I was there when that script came back. And then he opened up the manila envelope and started reading it, and his face just turned purple.
Mm.
And he goes, "That motherfucker." Because Frank didn't make the changes to
Sure.
bring Batman back on model. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Oh my god, that's funny. That's funny.
I laughed my ass off. I was like,
Denny, I could see Denny saying that. I could see Denny's face.
yeah, yeah.
We've
He didn't speak a lot, but when he did,
what a smart guy. What a man, he knew the craft. I sat in a couple of his classes where he talked about the craft and God.
of writing, the craft of writing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he taught at I think he taught at SVA, but he gave his talk to us, all the editors. Um, um, every other month he would come and talk with us, and we would all get together, and it was just astounding because he was such a quiet guy, and then he would do this sort of like this performance art almost, and everything he said was gold out of his mouth.
Yeah. Yeah, when we were at those conferences, he would sit back like the Godfather, and then somebody would say something stupid, like some idea, like we should have Batman, open up a tap dancing school, that's when Denny would chime in.
Yeah,
If anybody was going off model about who Batman was, I mean, there was a certain amount of leeway, of course, for creativity,
sure.
but there were certain core aspects he was unwilling to budge on.
Yeah,
And I think that's where there's a problem in the companies, is that there is nobody that understands these characters or cares enough about them to hold on to what makes them special
yeah.
and so loved. The
Well, I
first
think
series of Marvel movies were so successful because they adhered to, what the comics were.
yeah. Yeah, again, I think there are still a few, but dude, we were spoiled.
Mm,
We had all the guys we mentioned, all the guys and gals we mentioned. I mean, Karen Berger running Vertigo, and Mike
right.
Carlin, and Archie Goodwin, and so many talented people just down the hall.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. DC had a good editorial pool
Yeah,
at one point.
yeah.
Dick Giordano.
Giordano, and Jeanette Kahn ran the place, and she was an advocate for the art. And
Yes.
Marvel had some great editors too. I mean,
Yeah.
Mark Grunwald was incredible. He
Yeah.
was, and nobody loved comics more than him.
Yeah.
He just he knew how lucky he had it to be doing what he was doing.
I never got to meet Mark. I think I passed him once or twice in the hall, but never got to meet him
Mhm.
because, well, I actually, my first job at Marvel I was hired by Mike Carlin,
Mm.
who was Mark's assistant editor
Yeah,
at the time. But I never got to meet Mark. But everybody who did know him said that he was just, a guy that loves comics.
yeah,
And you could see that, in every picture and everything I've ever read about the guy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Good guy. So, all right, man. I'm gonna go have some dinner.
Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks again, Mark. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And tomorrow night, guys, is the Professionals. We're going to be playing Match Game. So it's game show night tomorrow. It's going to be a blast. We have 2 contestants that are going to be on the show, and we're going to ask the bros questions, just like in Match Game. I'm working on those questions now, and they're all going to be comic book and pop culture referenced open-ended questions. So tune in 8 o'clock tomorrow for that. At 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, we do the kickoff for 31 Days of Monsters, and I have Gary Durrani on, and who's a good friend of Mark's, and is going to talk about my monster list for the season. So tune in for that. And thanks again for everybody that came in, and we will see you next time. Have a great night. Bye, everybody.